Welcome to the Golden Feather. Grab a pint, a plate, and pick your seats. Your hosts, Virtek and ChibiBree, are back from their latest adventures.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Golden Feather. This week we have Steven, and that happens to be the name of our podcast.
Hey.
Welcome. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It's definitely a pleasure. I mean, without you, we wouldn't even be here. So,
True story.
I like the effect you have on the portal. I'm just seeing that right now.
Actually, one of the community members, the Couch Nerd, made it, and
nice.
Yeah, it was really cool. He makes some others. You guys released some backgrounds, and he added an effect on top of it. So
yeah, that's cool.
Thank you. Yeah, shout out to the Couch Nerd.
They're making some really cool stuff.
Yeah, definitely. And hello, chat. Welcome. We're happy to have you here as well.
And thank you, Necronix.
And Virtek is here with me as always.
Hello, everybody. I see some new faces.
Yeah, definitely. And there's a lot that's happening. I mean, we've had some news information that has popped up. Let's see. We just got news today about dev discussions. There's a new dev discussions thread in the forums. And there's a link. I'll go ahead and send it out to you guys. If you guys are interested in that, here you go. Ashes of Creation, thank you guys so much for the host. I really appreciate that.
Oh, yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, so right now I guess they're asking about any quests or anything in-game that has affected you and how. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think part of the dev discussion that went up on the forums today and what we plan to do moving forward is to really kind of get insight to a lot of the players' experiences in MMORPGs, because, you know, one of the great resources that we have as a gaming development is the players, and, you know, kind of the things that you guys have all experienced, that we've all experienced as players, and that stand out to you. So that first question, I think, relates, you know, to questing and what are some more of the memorable experiences you've had with regards to questing. What helps those types of experiences stand out for you when you think back about the games you've played before?
Okay. Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's a lot of us who have played MMORPGs. And actually, I think there's a few that this might be our first. I like the walks of life that everyone has come from, but there's some from World of Warcraft and a few others that I could definitely bring in, like, that just really make me applaud the developers. Like, it really touched at home. It really felt like I was a part of it, you know, and I enjoy that kind of gameplay development. I believe Virtek is checking up on our audio, making sure everything sounds good, so.
I feel like I am, for some reason, wherever I go, I just pull these audio issues with me, and they're like, you know, they're like haunts that exist around me.
Right, we're good. Whatever adjustments you did, it works out now.
Yeah, I just, it was maybe a little bit loud, so I just lowered it just the slightest. But yeah, thank you guys so much. But yeah, so aside from that, we are going to be covering a lot of different questions that you guys have and that we had. And well, first off, let's start with a little bit of icebreaker here. Yeah, what's your favorite part of Ash's development?
Ooh, my favorite part of the development. I would probably say that it's a tie between two things. First and foremost, you know, the favorite part I have is reading the discussions and chat and interaction amongst the community on both Discord and the forums, and especially when, you know, we've gone to the PAX events and had those panels and I get to chat with, you know, fans of the project who are waiting so patiently and supportively for, you know, alphas and betas to come out. I really enjoy that interaction. And, you know, the second thing I think that I enjoy very much is getting to, you know, to come into a studio each day and be surrounded by other passionate people who are also driven by that interaction with the community and are really just inspired because of that to get something out that's going to make people proud. I think those two things are probably the most rewarding, feelings that I have when coming to work each day.
Nice. Definitely great things to have.
So another one to throw you off a little bit. So if you could be one animal, what would it be?
If I could be one animal, man,
Is this like off the Ashes trail?
Wow, that totally threw me off. If I could be an animal, what would I be? Gosh, I don't know. That's a tough one. I feel like I'd want to be some type of bird, probably, like some type of bird that gets to fly a lot. That would be fun.
Nice.
Can it be a mythological creature?
It can be anything.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, if it were a mythological creature, I'd probably want to be like a sphinx or, or
Is that
like
for the supernatural riddle powers?
Yeah, there you go. Exactly. Yes.
All right. So, just to actually explain to some of the new faces here, our podcast is a little bit different than most. We're more community focused, so we do like to get to know our guest a little bit. Kind of get them out there, let everybody get to know them a little bit for the first part of the stream. So. Don't worry, there's going to be some real nuts and bolts questions about Ashes coming up, but we're going to get there.
Yeah. Oh, one question that came up. Was there ever a sandal in Apocalypse? Did it actually exist?
Yes. Yeah, there is a sandal in Apocalypse.
Nobody's found it yet. It's out there.
There's one in the lobby and one in the world.
We always made a joke like, I found the sandal, it's in the lobby.
Now, is it just a visible thing hanging out there, or is it actually like an item you can interact with?
I can't give too many clues, but it is in the world. It is in the world.
Yes, it's not in the sky.
No, it's not in the sky. No.
As many times as I've gotten trapped in the sky.
It's in a cloud somewhere. Levitating.
Leviosa.
Yeah. Speaking of getting to know the guest here, could you give us just a quick, brief rundown on your journey from just your life before until your life now?
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I've always been playing video games since I was like 6 years old, 6 or 7, and I started, my first video game was an MMORPG. It was Neverwinter on AOL. And my first experience as a kid was eating up the $6 by the hour price that I had no idea about until the end of the month, where I got in a lot of trouble from my mom as she got the bill. But from AOL, it was like $6 by the hour to play. So from there, I went down. I'm pretty eclectic as a gamer. I played console games. I played turn-based strategies, real-time strategies, MOBAs, city builders. But I think like I always enjoyed the social aspect of games. So even like the Civilization series, I love Civilization, but I usually only ever play multiplayer. And back when I was a kid, they only had like Hot Seat. They didn't have, the internet game. So I would have my friends over and we'd play Hot Seat Civ. And so we'd have to get up, out of the chair, and the next person would take their turn, and the next person would take their turn. And I loved RTSs like the Red Alert series, Command and Conquer, StarCraft, and one of my favorite turn-based strategies was like Birth of the Federation, which was this old Star Trek game by Microprose back in like '98 or something. But it was basically like Civilization Star Trek style. Nice. So I really enjoyed that. But yeah, no, I got involved in business relatively early. I was 15. I started my first company. But even as I was working throughout my late teens and early 20s, my social atmosphere was always, the MMO community. So, I ran a pretty large guild and found, friendship with people online who I never have an opportunity to meet if not for MMORPGs, which is one of the most, I think, cool aspects of what an MMORPG is and sets you apart, as a genre from pretty much everything else. I mean, but anyway, so as I grew older and kind of retired at like 28, 29, I kind of got upset with what I was playing from an MMORPG standpoint. I didn't feel like developments took risks, and they kept on tossing out these cookie cutter game, and then they would also like undermine the entire community aspect of any sense of accomplishment and risk versus reward by introducing these like predatory cash shops. So I decided, because I had the financial means to do so, to create my own company and make Intrepid out of what is a great area to pull from with regards to like talent and developer support. With having old Sony Online Entertainment, nearby, which was a powerhouse of MMOs for a long time, and being able to kind of drive this development with those veteran developers who know what they're doing. So.
That's if you can't
in a
find
nutshell.
In a nutshell.
If you can't find a game you like, make it, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. No, I wholeheartedly believe in, the kind of philosophy that you got to do it yourself, not because others can't or won't necessarily, but, just because, what you're striving for. And if others can share that philosophy, belief, or desire, if you build it, they will come. And I think that's kind of the driving force behind a lot of our design elements is, hey, we feel players, gamers share these desires. So let's build it and see if they come.
Absolutely. I like it.
Here's a good one. Since you are very busy with the Ashes of Creation development, when you had some free time, what were some of your favorite leisure activities outside of gaming?
Outside of gaming.
Yes, because we're all gamers here, obviously.
Yeah, that's a tough one. Leisure activities outside of gaming. Well, that's a tough one. Really, when I have leisure time, I usually game.
That's fair. That's very fair.
Yeah, and I mean, I played sport. I played like volleyball and football and tennis, racquetball, and I'm a big board game fan. So I play a lot of board games with friends. Settlers of Catan, Twilight Imperium, Spartacus.
Wow.
Those types of games I really enjoy. Again, anything that has a social dynamic to it, I think. D&D, I love Pathfinder.
Oh yeah, definitely love those.
Tabletop RPGs are a lot of fun. Also, I love tabletop miniatures game. I used to play a lot of Warhammer Fantasy. I love the old style Warhammer Fantasy where you had large, battalions and companies of rank and file units, and you got to customize your character with weapons and whatnot. And I used to play leagues of those. A lot of fun.
I really, honestly, if the game has a custom ability for characters, I'm all over it. But like the second I go into a game and I'm like, oh, I can't customize a character. Okay, bye.
Yeah, no. What's so funny is Warhammer. I have a large collection of pretty much every army from Warhammer Fantasy, and I was so upset when they moved from 8th edition into Age of Sigmar because they went more Warhammer 40k and they took away the customization and build kits for heroes. And I thought that was such a great dynamic where you could customize the build out of certain heroes, and that was kind of your piece of customization in the game. So I was a little upset that they took that change. Hopefully they bring back some components of that.
Rewind a little bit.
Yeah.
Sometimes turning back the clock is a good thing.
Yeah, sometimes.
So you did mention D&D in there. So that Vera D&D campaign. So a little bit more about it. What inspired it? Where did you draw inspiration for that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So that was many years ago. I created a homebrew Pathfinder campaign, which Pathfinder is, the extension of Dungeons and Dragons 3.5, created by Paizo. And
Paizo.
I wanted to move away from what was traditionally these campaign worlds of well-established history and lore. And, as a player kind of playing in these campaign settings, you kind of knew the major cities, the major players, all that kind of stuff. And instead, I wanted to make it more about, building the world up. So I created this story that, facilitated a return to an unknown world where there was a lot of artifacts and history to be discovered through just traveling and exploring this world that you've never been to before. So that was kind of the driving force for me when I created this homebrew campaign and the story. And then, as I would play out these scenarios with my Pathfinder group, I would expand on the back lore of different, antagonists in the story, and kind of create this reason for magic to exist, and the gods and religion that is present. And a lot of what I took inspiration from, at least with regards to the religion and the creation mythos of the Varen universe, really kind of comes from my love of a television series called Deep Space Nine, which was a Star Trek series. And I'm a huge Trekkie, and I love all the series that exist. But of all of the series, Star Trek Deep Space Nine kind of moved first in Star Trek history, kind of moved away from the episodic nature of the storytelling aspect, and weaved this narrative that spanned several episodes and basically created an overarching narrative. And that was the first time I'd seen a Star Trek series kind of do that. And one of the components of that overarching narrative was the relationship of the gods that existed in the wormhole, and those versus the good and evil kind of old story tale between the Pa-wraiths and the prophets, basically. So that was a big inspiration.
So when did you end up putting that together, the Vera D&D setup? How long ago?
I think that started, I think, in 2008. So it's about 11 years ago.
So it was cooking for a little bit. I like it.
Yeah.
And how much of the current, what you guys have compiled as this will be in lore and world goals were inspired by that specific campaign?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of backstory that's present from that campaign, but really to create the amount of quest storylines and components that go into creating Ashes of Creation, that all of that had to be expanded to 10 times really what was present. But from a source material standpoint, the Pathfinder campaign that I created is the canon. Okay.
I like. And you've obviously added a lot more, as you said, to create an MMO quantity of information. I can only imagine how much more you had to expand on it, because then details really matter. When you're leading the campaign in D&D, you can kind of make up a few things as you go.
I like how CM Shays in chat says, if we hunt down Steven's old Pathfinder buddies, we can get lore leaks. Actually, when I created Intrepid Studios, all of those old Pathfinder buddies signed NDAs. So good luck.
Covering all the bases there. Covering all the bases
Thinking
there.
ahead.
Yeah. Well, actually, real quick, Basil has a question about how you might try to combat inflation currency in game.
Yeah, so I mean, anytime from a design perspective, when you have concerns of inflation, obviously the use of sinks, as we call them, is a very important tool from a design standpoint to allow wealth to leave the economy. And, the important part of implementing different types of sinks into the game is making sure that those sinks scale with the lifetime of the server, so to speak. And also are tiered in a way so that they are not too restrictive early game, but are still relevant late game, right? So one, we implement a lot of sinks into the game. And two, we make sure that there are sinks that evolve with the life of the server.
Shadow and sinks.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that's really important because, there's a lot of those, as you said, you're very against pay to win and stuff like that. So there's a lot of these situations that arises in other video games where you can get a lot of gold and end up being able to buy a bunch of materials and then kind of own the market at that point, right, instead of earning the gold. When World of Warcraft swapped over to being able to buy a token and then sell that token on the marketplace.
Oh, I know.
I was a little crushed by it.
I don't understand. That is, I don't want to throw shade at other games because obviously they have a bottom line that they have to meet, and they have a board that they have to please, and shareholders that they have to give, these dividends to. But I think that, from a stability standpoint in your population, anytime you're offering an item for, that can be sold in game, that is effectively gold selling. You are selling gold. You're selling an item first before it becomes gold. And that was one of the things I didn't necessarily like about, some previous games that I played, was the access to those things, because then it became a necessary feature from a competitive gameplay standpoint. If this is a capability that some players have, then it must be a capability that all players use in order to stay competitive, especially near the upper echelon of the end game features like castle sieging or guild wars or competitive raid zones, stuff like that. And that's really unfortunate, because I think that when you have a strong subscription model, that should be sufficient to fund future development and new expansions and content updates, and allow the players to be their own within the world and not have to worry about getting their accomplishments subverted by the outside company.
True story.
Yeah.
True story.
Agree.
Boy, okay. Partnerships. But yeah, the previous main question about Vera kind of leads us into going into actual Ashes discussion here.
Yeah.
So, the most important question was already asked, and that was with the sandal in Apocalypse.
Was that the most important question?
That was the most important question ever.
Was it though?
It was. It really is. Everybody wants to know. So another one would be unique skills found only in specific parts of the map and only by exploring. How does that work exactly? Do you ever get a lead-in quest that takes you there, or is it you have to explore and dig around and actually have the desire to find things in order to stumble across these extra skills and traits?
So it's a little bit of both. You'll have some lead-in quests that will send you out to venture into the fringes of the wilderness, but that'll only get you a part of the way. Then there's going to be, you're going to make a choice once you're there to either continue that wanderlust, objective and get out and discover places that are off the beaten path in order to find those types of benefits.
Nice. So definitely have an inquisitive mind and want to look for them.
I like that. Let's see. I'll get to the BR questions later because those will be good for wrap up. But there's a lot of good ones. Let me pull up one that I was personally curious about from this morning. I don't know if I'm saying this person's name right. I'm so sorry. Goiko, I believe is how you say it, asked about with the creatures in the world and basically things that are tameable. So with the creatures around the world being tameable and some and pets being exclusive, can you find the same types of creatures around the world? For example, the Pride Stalker being exclusive, can you find a wild Pride Stalker in the world? And if so, can you tame it? Then the mount would not be exclusive. You can also customize your mount with animal husbandry, so how would you find the different versions of that mount you would like to customize? Is it like you can find the creature in the world with different looks, but you cannot tame it?
So you will not. Sorry, you may notice the lights just came on.
Yes.
Hi.
Hi.
Dark in here. So you will not be able to find exclusive cosmetics in the world, even through professions such as animal husbandry. However, that's not to say that there may not be, similar creatures that exist out there, and part of the animal husbandry system obviously is to reveal. I think we did I think a long time ago. Gosh, it was like maybe a year ago or something. We released some of the Pride Stalker mounts facial features and having like different key facial features based on how you could breed that mount. So even the cosmetic mounts, even the exclusive mounts will have deviations that are available to the cosmetic through the animal husbandry system.
Okay.
And that's integral in the idea behind how those types of deviations become available.
So basically, won't be the exact same, but it'll be similar to it.
Yeah, so it's still going to be that aspect of you can see a bunch of little one specific type of creature walking around, but if you see one that's purple, that the only way they got that is through the exclusive way to obtain that one.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say, it's not a color, just a color deviation. Nor would I say that the Pride Stalker mount, as a specific example, or any exclusive mount, you're not going to see those types of variations earnable in game. They're just going to be achievable through the animal husbandry system. Yeah.
Okay. So, speaking of pets and such, so the finding of dragon eggs in the wild. I know it's been mentioned before, if you defeat a dragon, there's a possibility, but not all dragons, etc., etc. Like, there's a chance you're going to find one somehow, some way. Now, how exactly does that work? The current idea of the process, is it going to hatch and be raised from a young one up to a rideable age? Or maybe it'll start as like a non-combat pet and then go to a battle pet and then full-size rideable? Or is it just spawned from the egg full grown?
So with regards to the royal pets, even the ones that can be achieved through defeating legendary world bosses, those will have a hatching period that they exist in, and will require several different quest lines and rare materials in order to raise the mount to the to adulthood or adolescence, where it can be rideable. We may include phases where it is a land mount for a period of time, and then in adulthood can be a flying mount. But that would be a little bit of scope creep, and that was not our initial plan. So I just say that might be an expansion that comes post launch or something. But the idea there is this is an investment. This is something that is kind of the end objective when it comes to mount achievement, and it's going to require some tender love and care and devotion on behalf of the player.
I like that a lot, actually, because that gives you more of an interaction with the things that are in game rather than just owning it and then being like, yeah, sometimes I use this mount.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I guess the core concept when it comes to these different gameplay loops that are present in Ashes is really what deviates us from other projects that have kind of stayed to the play it safe scenario, is that we embrace the investment and hard work and return for your time that risk versus reward, risk being the time that you spend doing something, reward being the, feeling of satisfaction you have because of that time or investment. So you'll find that type of philosophy present in many of the systems. And it doesn't have to be a long-term necessarily core loop. We have ideas that range from a more casual player that might only get to spend, several hours a week, but they still have areas in which they can feel satisfaction and achievement. A lot of games tend to believe that you have to cater to the casual player, only, and that's how you're going to get user acquisition and be successful and whatnot. But I think that there is a very large market within the MMORPG community that want to get back to that idea of fulfillment and of a progress that takes effort, and that's the risk that a lot of developments, in my opinion, aren't willing to take.
Yeah. And I really, really like that that it might be a ground mount before potentially being able to fly with it. I think, as you were saying, with the satisfaction and achievement level, that gives a little bit more of a phase for people to kind of show off what they got and that they achieved it while they're going through all the quest lines, like have a little tiny dragon following them around or whatever is a little...
Oh, yeah. One of my favorite games that I've mentioned always in the past, Lineage 2, they had a dragon that you could fly if you owned a guild hall in one of the cities. I think it was Aiden, or if you were the guild leader of a castle, you could fly that dragon. It was ineffective. The dragon really was just a status symbol. You couldn't use it in combat, and it was kind of very, just cumbersome. But before you could spawn the dragon, you had to have a hatchling that was a strider, and the strider was this like land dragon with no wings, but it was like a little baby, and you rode the baby around. I thought that was really cool, and I liked that progression present there. Now, the idea behind the royal mount is that this is the best type of mount you can have, and it will be relevant and extremely capable when it comes to combat settings and mobility and usage on the battlefield. That's where we're going to deviate. But I love the progression sense. Also, another previous game I enjoyed playing was Arcage. Now, Arcage didn't have, that more established phases between their mount system, but they did have a period where you had to feed the mount, gosh, I can't remember the name of the plant, but you had to feed them out when it was in the little baby stage, and you got to see it in a cute little baby stage. And I thought that was always fun.
There was actually something similar like that in World of Warcraft, which is what I encountered when I was 13 at the time. But it's where you had this little pet, and you had to feed it and take it out every day and feed it meat, and you had to go kill these monsters to give it meat, and eventually it lost teeth, and you collected teeth and turned it in for a quest reward. And then it grew up, and I was just like, oh my gosh, it's the cutest thing ever. It's a little baby dinosaur, and I loved it.
Yeah. What was it? There was something else that we were thinking about that involved little teeth or something. We were thinking about a child system where you could have, you could have children result from a marriage in Ashes. We're likely not going to do this, but I'll share with you some of the theory crafting. And you could house, so the child would be sort of a pet, right? And you could house the child at your freehold. So you could only raise a child if you had a freehold and if you were married to another player. But then the child, could advance to adolescence and whatnot, and then eventually would go off into the world. So it'd be a timed pet, so to speak. Nice. And they could do chores at the house, they could rotate crops, and they could, clean up messes or whatnot, which would be kind of fun to do. But one of the things with regards to teeth would be, as they reach a certain stage, if you could find baby teeth under their pillow or whatnot, and use those for a fairy tooth reward and whatnot, and give the child powers or special abilities like faster crop rotation or whatever. Anyways, that would be
nice. Faster hedge trimming.
Exactly. But then we ran into the problem as what happens if a siege occurred, at the local node, and someone destroyed your freehold. Where would the terrible, right? And so Jeff Bard was like, Stephen, we can't have children because then we'd also have to have like orphanages, and we'd have to have like the children of the destroyed Freehold would have to be at the orphan location or something, and that's just too serious. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I guess we can't.
Gosh.
I guess that's not a thing.
Well, I'm glad that might not be. I don't know, Virtek. I don't know if I can marry you in game over that.
I tried to fight for the child feature. You know, maybe that's something we can do later post launch or something. But I just
boy.
so much fun. Yeah, see, somebody in chat says it's actually illegal to have kids being killed in games. I don't know if that's true, but you know, who says they're killed? They could just disappear.
They just disappear.
You know?
No,
Yeah.
maybe it's like you have to go claim them from an area because your freehold got destroyed. I don't know.
My
Like
freehold's gone, and so are my children.
It's a baby
I
carrot.
can't find my child. That'd be a great quest line.
Suddenly there's an enemy NPC with your child's name over it. Oh my gosh, they turned him. They turned him.
Oh gosh.
Oh, man.
Oh boy.
So, back on track.
Yeah.
Oi.
Well, what if there's another quest line where the children of the destroyed freeholds actually become corrupt and exist in a child dungeon where, like, you know, you have to fight them off and like
Oh
get to
boy. Is that a Halloween edition?
exactly. And you're looking down the dungeon hallway and you see your child just with
Oh,
red
God.
eyes looking at you.
Oh man, be like one
I'm
of those
sorry, I
dungeons where you just
totally
have-
went off on a tangent.
Oh boy.
One of those are just waves of enemies coming at you.
Uh,
Defend against the waves, they're coming again. Wait, is that a Slurpee? What are they throwing at us?
oh my
Oh
god.
jeez, children of the corn, children of the freehold.
Yes, Children of the Corn. That was such a. Oh my gosh, that's a great one.
Oh,
Like
boy.
one of the crops you have on your new freehold is like corn, and the stalks rise really high, and like at night you just see eyes from the corn.
Oh gosh.
Yes, I love it.
Uh,
So speaking of trying to hide from creepy things, so in game with stealth classes, will there be a difference in stealth time and stealth mechanics between in combat and out? For instance, will a player be able to enjoy a little bit more relaxed stealth time if they're just trying to creep around and avoid enemies and explore new areas, versus in, say, a castle siege where they only have a limited time to avoid somebody witnessing them and seeing what they're up to?
So the setting will not dictate the cooldown and or usage period of a particular skill like stealth. However, upon combat, whether with nature, with the environment, or with another player, will turn the stealth off. So
Okay.
it won't adjust the cooldown period.
Okay. This question is for our lore lovers out there. Everyone, including myself and Virtek, loved the last lore blog. But, you know, we kind of need to feed that addiction a little bit. Are there any potential lore blogs coming up in the nearest future?
There's very, you know, part of my philosophy on the lore is we don't want to give away so much of the story, right? And lore can sometimes be an insight to the story that's going to be present in the game. So we're going to be, obviously, Margaret has planned, you know, several blogs that we will touch on certain lore, but it's going to skirt around kind of the setting and the lore of the game without revealing too much.
Okay.
Okay. So slowly, we're gonna get a trickle at least. Be something coming. So,
Yeah.
Cosmetics and weapon skins and such. We got a couple questions on those.
Yes.
The first one, some of the skins, like say for instance the Eldritch model from the BR. If you earn that, is it applicable to any weapon type, or is it linked specifically to the one weapon type that skin shows in the image? Like say the Eldritch sword, it shows a specific type of sword. Is it limited to, say, only long swords, or could it also be used on two-handed swords, bastard swords, etc.?
Right. So those types of skins are tied to weapon types within Apocalypse. And they'll have a corresponding type that they're applicable to that matches in the MMORPG. So you have two-handed swords, you have two-handed axes, you have two-handed spears, you have one-handed maces, one-handed swords. Those will be the crossover types that these get applied to.
Okay.
Cool.
And another question that I saw in the chat, and I'm sorry, but I had to ask this question. It's very related to me. I love Japanese style. So Seraph Origin asked, can we know if there are any Japanese weapons or armors?
There is some Japanese influence with some of the cultures that are in Ashes of Creation. So you you won't see a one for one, but you will likely be able to identify some of the influential aspects of that culture in Ashes.
Okay, perfect. Because I love just like Japanese culture, Asian culture in general, but I like that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And the other one actually I had based on the cosmetics was the dyeing of pieces.
Yes, exactly.
Like, are they, it's kind of a two-part question. Are all cosmetics able to be dyed? And are they able to be dyed in multiple colors? Say like the base color and then highlights?
So not all cosmetics are capable of being dyed. And the cosmetics that are capable of being dyed, those have a range of the applicable portions of the cosmetic that can be dyed. Additionally, of the non-cosmetic armors that exist in game, those are dyeable, and there are specified highlights that exist on the armor pieces that are subject to the dye.
Okay. And Tay wants to know about the Kickstarter racial angel wings. Can you dye those any color?
No, you cannot dye the racial wings on the Kickstarter cosmetic.
Bom, bom, bom. So we do have a couple questions on gathering, crafting, and processing professions. One of them is that we know that resource points can deplete. Is it possible for one of them to be completely depleted, forcing a gatherer to travel fairly far to gather more, which makes sense for things like metals, but how about herbs? Is there an idea of respawn timers, or is there going to be an active
So
method?
There are different types of resource node points. And I hate to say the word node because that's can be somewhat confusing, but these resource nodules that exist in the world, there are different types that apply to different types of gatherables. So you have herb beds, and those herb beds can be depleted for a period of time and spawn elsewhere in the world, causing travel necessary. There are herds, and herds are a resource nodule that will exist in the open world and provide certain gatherables. Those can also be depleted and will have to respawn elsewhere in the world potentially. And then there are veins and mines and earthbound kind of resources and materials. Those also can be excavated completely and need to be spawned elsewhere in the world, requiring travel.
Okay. So with metals, specifically, so does that leave it open to where the entire map would not be able to be strip mined? Because that's one concern somebody has with metals. If an area is depleted of metal, it's kind of depleted of metal, and if something else spawns in the rest of the world, that'd be nifty. But if they don't really spawn mines like that.
No, they will spawn elsewhere in the world. So the idea behind the resource nodule system is that there are a plethora of locations that have acceptable nodules for resource spawns. And when one is depleted, it will spawn elsewhere in the world. It must spawn elsewhere in the world. When it's depleted there, the previous site becomes available again as a new spawn, potentially. But the idea behind resources is that they tend to be a large collection of resources before they're depleted completely.
Okay, perfect. I like that.
And the reason for that is because we want to again centralize the social aspect of gameplay, right? So, a lot of other games I played with resource gathering, you have these little tiny points where you can collect one or two things. It despawns for a minute or 2 minutes, and then it respawns, and you do this kind of rotation around, where the resource point is or whatever. I want these places to be social hubs. Like, you will see your gatherer friends all at this location for this particular region, and there's safety in numbers, and you can kind of hang out there and do your thing. I think that's kind of the direction we want from an interaction standpoint for this to work.
Okay.
And then I guess probably just a couple more on crafting, and we'll move along. Because we do have a lot of people asking questions about crafting and gathering and such.
Sure.
So, with the mastery, I believe you stated at one point you can really only master one thing. Does that span all trees? Say, for instance, can you master one crafting, one gathering, one processing? Or is it across any kind of artisan type class?
So the artisan classes are broken up into the 3 trees: gathering, processing, and crafting. And you can only be a master of one.
Okay.
Simple, straightforward. And Frando actually just brought up a question with the smithing. Is it broken up into things like armor smithing and weapon smithing, therefore you can only do one of those? Or would it be specific types of armor as well, that you can only master one type of armor?
We have a couple of thoughts on this that we're planning to test in alpha, and we'll probably release more about that as we get closer to alpha 1. But the idea is that we can either lump armor crafting into one, and that would include the different types of armor, or we can break those out into specifically those types of armors. And same is true for weapon crafting. We can either break up the weapon crafting into multiple, woodwork, metalwork, stonework kind of weapons, bows, and or we can put it all into a weapon crafting category.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Talking about nodes and such, aside from the monetary gain of nodes in the region, what are guild-specific benefits of Guild Hall versus Guild Fortress?
So the Guild Hall is something that can be purchased within a node, or it can be built on a guild freehold. So when a guild reaches a certain level, the guild master will be granted a guild freehold certificate, and they can build a guild hall on that. What separates that from the fortress, right? The fortress is kind of like a competition, and the fortress design is also something that might be on the shelf. I haven't decided yet. We're going to look into it. But the idea behind the fortress is that this is a competitive kind of guild hall, so to speak, where you have to contend for it on a regular basis, so to speak, or can be taken from you necessarily. Whereas the guild hall is a structure similar to your freehold structure. It can only be taken through successful sieges against a node per se, or not taken but destroyed. So that'd be the primary difference between those two. The question was with regards to money. Was that what it was? I didn't hear that.
Aside from basically when you capture one of the fortresses that can be sieged, besides just the monetary gain of getting taxing from that region, all the nodes in the region, what are guild-specific benefits of going from just a regular guild hall to taking over that fortress? Guild-specific benefits.
So the benefit from and I'm assuming you're referring to castles as opposed to fortresses. Fortresses were a separate idea that we had that was kind of like an advanced guild hall feature that would have to be contended over, or a miniature castle feature. And there would be several of them in the world that existed. But like I said, that fortress idea might be shelved a little bit. The castles, however, castles exert taxation dominance over its region. They offer the royalty mount. They offer a lot of different features that's also scheduled for one of our blog posts with regards to castles and how and what mechanics and systems exist there for guilds to participate in. They also have dedicated node structures around them, 3 nodes per castle that allow for upgrading the defenses and capabilities of that castle from a guild perspective.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Let's see. The other question that I see here in chat is asking about being able to sell stuff out of your freehold once you get past, I believe, a level 3 node.
So you can establish businesses on the freehold, and you can sell cooking items through the businesses. You can have a vendor present where you sell, crafted goods through the business, avoiding some of the taxation of the nearby nodes, stuff like that. So the idea there is you can also sell, through those foods can also offer buffs. You have quest hooks that can be allotted and accessible from your freehold should you choose, that bring visitation there. The idea is to give players kind of the ability to create their own little hamlet that, other players can stop at to get, access to the rest of the world and stuff.
Cute.
Right.
I like it. So another question involving nodes and sieging and such. So when a node, specifically Metropolis, is destroyed in a siege, will the community leadership, say the mayor and such, have an in-game method to communicate with all of the citizens of that node to, say, organize them to another nearby node that they specifically want to build up as the next Metropolis?
Yeah, once the siege is complete and the Metropolis has lost the siege, there will be a destruction state that exists where you have lootability mechanics active for the attackers. You have destruction and attack mechanics available against freeholds and structures that exist outside of the node but under its zone of influence. As the city burns, so to speak, you'll still have your communication systems online with your fellow citizens as you effectively try to defend the territory from, the roaming or raging barbarians of these attackers or whatever. But once that period is complete, which could potentially span several hours, right now it's scheduled to span 2 hours post-siege, but it could span several hours. You might play with that. Once that's complete, those communication systems will cease to exist. All of those interconnectivity citizenship systems will cease to exist. And those members will be, off to coordinate in other ways.
Okay, so there's at least some time period where they can kind of communicate and reorganize. So, all right, then spread the word after the fact.
Yeah.
Right.
Got it.
Cool. Let me see. Sorry, I'm also catching up with chat at the same time. Let's see. I'm not sure what to ask next. I'm sorry.
Yeah, there's so many different questions. We had a pile of them before the stream even started.
I guess I'll ask a clarifying one that Necronix would like to just be sure. I wasn't sure if this was related, if you already answered it, but they're asking about just wanting to know how does the stealth work out of combat compared to in combat. I know you said that the cooldown times for the abilities doesn't really change, but they were wondering if the assassin-based classes out of combat, if the stealth lasts longer.
So you can't have stealth in combat. Once you enter combat, the stealth dissipates. So you're out of combat, so to speak, stealth. This is when you're not dealing damage, attacking, or being attacked, or under the effect of a harmful spell. If that's the case, then your stealth period is the length of the skills effectiveness. So
Okay.
I think in APOC it was like 30 seconds for the stealth spell.
Right.
And there could be augments that increase the time period of the stealth spell.
Interesting.
The idea behind active skills is that you can augment them with your secondary class augments, with certain society and or racial augments. And some of those augments may be able to either extend time or change the nature of how stealth works.
Okay. Another question related to combat. When a player dies by a mob after, like, say, another player attacked him and got him low, will that player get corruption if the mob killed him?
So, sorry. I'm so sorry.
It's
you cut
fine.
out for me one more time. What was that?
When a player dies by a mob because of another player getting him low in health, will that player get corruption?
No, the player must kill another player in order to gain corruption.
Okay.
So that does provide the opportunity for certain types of griefing mechanics, but we have you cannot, unless you're in party, you cannot view the health of another player. So it's going to be a delicate game trying to lower their health effectively against a monster without taking the risk of killing them.
Okay.
Okay, so even as you're fighting them, you don't really see an indication of their overall health or life?
You do, yeah. Right now, the way that out of party health viewing works is you can select a player, and their nameplate, the targeting nameplate, will have damage on the nameplate, like cracks and whatnot. And the more severe the cracks, the better indication you have of their health status. But it doesn't give you a direct indication of what level of health they're at.
Okay.
Okay, gotcha.
I know that there's a lot of questions, you guys, so we're doing our best to mix them in because we have a lot of questions too.
Yeah, we approached this with a big pile of them, and we got a bunch from you in stream, so we're trying to mix them up here.
Right.
But,
I noticed Jack Boy says, or Jack Bohai says, what if someone's following and healing a corrupted player? So if you heal a corrupted player, you become flagged for PvP, at which point players may attack and kill you without penalty.
Oh, I like that. No trolling or sitting around on the sidelines and trying to help your corrupted buddy without any consequences.
Oh yeah.
So here's something that would some people were curious about, and it may also help out with some recruiting and such. So it's about your hiring right now. Remote working employees, seems like there are a good number of them, but just the action of remote working has been studied a lot, and the results kind of vary from increased to decreased productivity. But one thing that's fairly consistent is a reduction of team cohesiveness. With your hiring focus on the work atmosphere and culture, what processes and ideals do you have in place to help prevent the team from developing an accidental air gap in their willingness or capability to work together?
So there's two aspects of remote work in reference to what we currently are utilizing at the studio. One is the true sense of the word remote. An individual is working from their home setup, and they get to plug into our to our office from home, and they're likely out of state. We only have a very small handful of those individuals, less than I think 5. And then just to not be confused with offices that are outside of the state and or partners that we have outside of California, such as the group that we're working with in France and group we were working with in Malaysia. Those are at studios in those locations that have management and cohesiveness within that studio per se, not like at home remote work. As a general rule, I am only hiring full-time employees here in San Diego that are capable of coming into the studios, because I believe cohesiveness, collaboration, cooperation, this kind of team building aspect, and specifically when it comes to creating an MMORPG, which is the most complicated type of video game you can make, that needs to be something that is foremost important when building a team. So I don't typically hire remote.
Okay.
Gotcha. Good. Yeah, I've been on some teams where the cohesiveness and teamwork is so important that they had. Granted, some of the higher tiers, like directors and such, had an office just so they could close the door and have a serious conversation. But they had that office right next to the desks of everybody who was taking calls, everybody who did this, that. Everybody was quite literally a paper airplane throw away from each other. Mm-hmm. And it actually really helped a lot. Just being able to turn around and lean over to the owner of a product that you guys are working with and saying, hey, so what's going on with this thing? Helped out a whole lot.
Yeah.
But another little bit of a deep question before we start getting into a little bit quicker fire stuff that we can knock out was
by the way, I only have about another 5 to 10 minutes before I have to jump into my next meeting.
Okay, gotcha. So we'll go ahead and dive off of our the questions we had beforehand, and we'll get to some of the stream questions then.
Well, Tay wants to know, will character creator allow us to make toner that might look somewhat like kobolds from Pathfinder or D&D?
Yeah.
I wouldn't say exactly, but there's definitely elements of kobolds that you could incorporate in a character creator with the Tolnar, yes.
Okay.
Perfect. So, how will the Freehold system be distributed? Will every player just have one? Are they uniquely tied to something in the lore story, or will you have to buy them from a merchant?
So you'll have to complete certain quests and material requirements from a stage 3 or higher node NPC in order to attain your Freehold certificate
Okay.
or Freehold flag.
That's pretty cool, actually. We know that the leader of nodes can ride dragons, and that those dragons can be used in battles. Might there be skill trees for those dragons or armor sets that can be crafted?
There's definitely barding that mounts are capable of having, yes. That includes royal mounts. And then there are certain skills that mounts are capable of having as well that get unlocked through different mechanics that we'll expand more on when we release kind of our mounts blogs. But so there are skills and there are armors that mounts can wear and have.
Okay. I have to go look for it real quick, but it's a question about moving. Okay, update on moving into the new studio and how will it improve the development?
Well, it'll improve the update on moving to the new studio is we are still working on that. Right now, we've just added 17, or we're adding 17 more seats into this studio, so it's getting extremely, extremely crammed. But how it will help is allowing us to hire additional personnel. So, we can fit upwards of 70 in the studios, but we need to make that much larger in a very quick period of time.
Okay.
So that's something we are working on.
And we understand the importance of needing time to work on back-end server stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Will we be taught how the game mechanics work throughout the game, other than the tutorial? Like, not hand-holding, but more like teaching the basic mechanics, like augment systems.
Yeah, so I mean, the idea behind an introduction to kind of any game that has complex and very in-depth mechanics is to try to give you an early look and touch taste of these things, through levels 1 through 10, and then expand on them deeper as you encounter them later in your leveling. So that's kind of the approach we're going to take when it comes to your introduction to Ashes. You will have systems in place that give you early introduction to just touching these vast systems, and then later as you continue to progress, you will explore them more.
Okay.
And I have time for one more question.
One more, huh? All right.
Make it a good one.
A really, really good
Here's
one.
a really good one then, because I was kind of curious about this myself, and it was brought up. By someone in our guild here. So, how different will subclasses actually be from each other? Say the difference between a high sword, which is a fighter cleric, from a spell sword, which is fighter mage. Will they be just different flavors with just super minor differences, or will they be different classes altogether? And the same question applies for like the twin classes, like a high sword, which is fighter cleric, and then Templar, which is cleric fighter.
Mm-hmm. So they should feel very different. Really, it comes down to your archetype provides a primary role that you can customize, and you can, move in one of the different role directions a little bit based on how you build out the character class skill tree. And then the subclass system, the secondary class system, that provides augments which radicalize the taste, feel, and role components of your primary archetype, either moving it further in a different role's direction or doubling down on the established role of the archetype specifically. So I guess short answer is they're intended to radically change the look, feel, and role capabilities that your class traditionally would provide.
Gotcha.
All
right. So, I want to thank you for your time. I know you said you got to get going.
Yeah.
Very appreciative of your busy schedule. So,
I enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. I loved the discussion.
Thank you. Yeah, no, we loved hearing your input on a lot of the stuff, and I'm sure there's a lot more burning communities or questions out there in our community. Sorry, I was reading chat at the same exact time. A lot of burning communities. No, let's not burn the community.
Let's not today.
But yeah, we have a lot of burning questions, and I hope we got a lot of them answered. And I mean, if you guys have any that are still out there, they have a question for them, I believe. If not, they have the channel in their official Ashes of Creation Discord, and others of us in the community are happy to answer whatever ones that we can. So yeah, and it was a pleasure getting to know you a little bit.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
So
well, thank everybody for stopping by.
Yeah,
and all of you.
Thank you guys for the love. Tremendous amount of support from you guys. Thank you.
We'll be back again next week at 5 p.m. Pacific. Right here, same place, same bad time, same bad channel.
And
all right, thank you guys.
Thanks, Steven.
Adios.
Take care.
You too.